Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm so excited today because today I have a very special guest on. Uh, dear friend from high school. Do you want to? You can say your first name, but you don't have to if you don't.
Hi, I'm Marianne.
That's my friend Rianne, and this is me, and I'm my own friend Alex.
You're your own friend. You
Yeah,
are.
I feel it's important to be, your own friend, which is kind of why I've been trying to clean myself up lately, just because I feel like, when you think about who you are, like try to treat yourself like you would treat like what if you were body swapped with somebody and then you wanted to be like nice with their body, like if you like cared about the person, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be a slob with their body, and it's like, how come I wouldn't treat myself the same way? So that's
Yeah, I see. I see. I
yeah.
understand.
But speaking of body swapping, we have some topics we want to hit on today.
Yeah, of course.
Do you feel like do you have anything you want to get out with, like right out of the gate?
No, not really. So we can just jump into topics or just talk.
Yeah, I mean, either one of those, of course. But I'm kind of excited about okay, so this body swapping thing. So you listened to like the first like 13 or so minutes of my first podcast?
The first 10 or so.
First 10 or so?
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
sorry, my voice is dying.
dude, oh no, it's been like 55 seconds.
And now my throat has just been sore for like a few weeks now. But it's okay. I'll just sound kind of frog-like.
I mean, you already have that telephone. Oh, they're not with me in the studio today. They are over the phone because they are 500 miles south.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's okay. You got to get some honey and lemon with that. That's the key sort of thing you need to do to fix that throat.
When I was sick before, I just ate straight spoonfuls of honey.
Wait, but like just honey though?
Yeah. Was it good for me? No. But was it good? Yes.
Yes. Um, did I get to the like Freaky Friday thing?
No.
No. Okay, that must have come later. But so I have like this thing with. So have you seen the movie Freaky Friday?
No. I
Okay.
read the sequel to one of the books.
You read the sequel to the Disney movie Freaky Friday.
No, because you know how when they make a Disney movie, they always make a book to capitalize on that.
No. Oh my God. Wait. So
I actually don't know. The book might have come first, but I think the sequel came after the movie.
I mean, there is a movie that came out like in the '80s, and the one with Lindsay Lohan is technically a remake.
I don't know. But body swapping is a fairly common trope.
It's a common trope. That's true. Um, I bet you can track it back to like It's a Wonderful Life and how he's technically like disembodied. Uh,
I'm sure you can track it back even farther.
Dude, do you think the Greeks had like body swapping myths?
The Greeks, I'm sure there's classic literature. I mean, off the top of my head, there's some that like surround the idea of relating the body and consciousness, you know?
Hell yeah. Body and consciousness. Okay, so basically my thing with Freaky Friday is, so generally with movies you're supposed to like suspend your disbelief for the premise at least. And the premise of this movie is, like they swap bodies and they have to like learn a lesson about each other, like what, how hard it is to be in the other one's shoes. Oh, it's a mom and a daughter. But
Yeah,
what's the sequel even about?
I can't tell you. I read it when I was in like in third grade.
Oh my God. Dude, you were reading Disney sequels in the third grade?
I read everything in the third grade.
Everything? The
There's,
Iliad?
there's another set of stories about. It's not by the same author, but there's like another set of like children's books
Hmm.
where a kid keeps swapping bodies with random people.
Oh
He
my
swaps
God, no, wait.
bodies.
Yes. I
I
know
don't
what you're.
remember. I don't remember his name.
Oh
But
my, oh my God.
he swapped the bodies with like
His teacher and a dog.
his teacher, his dog. I think he swapped bodies with Santa.
With Santa? Oh my god. Yeah, like all these other kids were into like the animal maniacs or what was that called?
Animorphs.
Animorphs. But nah, I was all about like this kid who had like this body swapping machine. Did you read the one where he switched bodies with his PE teacher, but the machine messed up, and so like it was his head on his PE teacher's body?
I think potentially.
There's a scene where like he comes home, and the first thing his parents ask are like, "Have you been doing steroids?" And I was like, "Holy shit, steroids work like
I
that?"
think I just remember the coach coming up to the kid and be like,
Don't
don't ruin my body."
I eat 3,000 nutrients a day.
Yeah.
As nonsensical as that dialogue is. But it's the same thing. You mean okay, you don't even know it's in the sequel, but that's fine. So they swap bodies and like everyone's like, you suspend your disbelief for the premise and that's fine. But if I just want to like sort of think about that. Like what does that mean? Like we know their brains don't physically get transplanted, right? And like, sure it's just magic, but like what is that consciousness bit like if you were to like stop and like dissect magic, like what is happening there? Like if they got like brain transplants, like you could be like, oh okay, that like because they're like that's where, so we can assume that consciousness is like, we all can agree that like it's in the brain, like that's where consciousness is, just like ignoring like identity and whatnot, but like where your central thinking system is like in the brain. But like where's the consciousness cortex?
I mean, it depends what functions you describe consciousness with.
Oh
Is
shit.
it memory? So is it in the memory section, or where does it begin?
Even then though, isn't like memory not stored in a singular place in the brain?
Oh yeah.
Like
But
that's crazy.
there's kind of like the video you sent me. There's the automatic memory and there's declarative memory, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking cognitive science right now.
Ooh, nice.
Just the intro to cog sci. But what we talked about, aside from like all the different functions of the different parts of the brain, is the concept of declarative memory versus procedural memory. So procedural memory is the kind of stuff that comes automatically, like once you learn to ride a bike or whatever, or like with just walking or talking.
Uh-huh.
These are things that you don't think about while you're doing, and that if you were to try to teach someone, then you can't just tell them and they'll know it. Whereas declarative memory is what you can just tell someone and then they'll know it.
Sort of like experience, like you can, like if you wanted to play a sport, you'd have to do procedural memory to like build muscle memory, but you can't just say like throw a ball like this and then they won't know how to do it. But you can say, say the words throw a ball like this and then they can, I don't know, say it in that order kind of thing.
Like if I tell you how to throw a football, that doesn't mean you're going to do it well the first time,
Right, yeah.
Whereas if I tell you, to ride a bike, you sit on the seat and you push the pedals with your legs fast and the bike won't fall because you're balancing. I can tell you that and you'll know conceptually how to ride a bike. But if I fail you on a bike, that doesn't mean you know how to ride it,
Yeah. So, for those at home, the video I sent her that she's talking about is, I believe it was called You Probably Don't Exist. Why You Probably Don't Exist by Exerbia. And he goes over a thing that I've been like thinking about recently. And I remember that I actually watched the video before I had this whole like thought thing that I thought about it. And then I watched it again and I was like, oh shit, I wonder if that's where like I got it from somewhere. Yeah, so and basically in the video he goes over like, what are you? It's like, well, we can kind of rule out that you aren't like your muscle memory, like the things that you do automatically aren't you.
I don't see why those can't be me,
I feel like the things that are me, I just like right now, I feel like it's the things that are different than other people. Like, I feel like breathing, as much as it is a part of me, if I was just somehow granted the ability to no longer breathe, I feel like I wouldn't feel like I lost a part of myself, you know?
But let's say there, breathing is a basic one.
Okay.
But let's take, I don't know, because we can pick something like walking, right? At this point, walking is completely intuitive to you, except for the times when it's not. But if you lost the ability to walk, would you feel like your personhood is impacted in any way,
I would, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so let's take another example. He said in his video, playing an instrument, right? After a while, that becomes automatic to you. You're not thinking about it. You just know where the chords are, what the rhythm is,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, right? But the entire process beforehand of learning that, is that you?
No, yeah, go ahead.
The process of turning that from active memory into automatic memory, is that you?
I feel like the memories I created while I would have done it would be me. Like, I would look back on those memories and remembering the things and what I learned.
Yeah, I felt my problem with the whole premise of this video was that consciousness itself is sort of a passive thing. So to conflate consciousness and the idea of self, because
whoa, you're saying those are different?
Well, because at the end he goes to the idea of awareness, right? And I would say that consciousness and awareness
are the same thing.
Are the exact same thing. But his concept, I guess, was that you are what you choose to do. Which kind of ties back into what you were talking about in your last podcast for the idea of what does it mean to exist?
Yeah. It also, I feel like this can inevitably tie back to free will. Like, what is it when we have free will? Like, when we choose like A or B, whatever, like the very prime source of like consciousness to us, I think we typically think as like that what chose A or B is inherently us. Like, if it wasn't like we're playing a song and it's like, do I play the E string or the G string? Like, because that's obvious. But like, if it comes to a choice where we have to think about it, that at some level there's a thing that is truly us as an individual made a choice. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And then what gets me is like the whole idea behind free will. I didn't expect to talk about free will right now, but
I think a lot of conversations come back to free will, honestly.
It's nuts. I have this other episode where I talk with one of my coworkers about free will, and I was just completely on another train of like when we choose something, is it just like our biology? And they're like, oh, we're talking more like society. And I was like, oh, but
that's the thing, right?
Okay.
Because let's say you decide that either everyone has free will or no one has free will or whatever you want, right? And that's an individual thing. Like if I wake up and I'm like, I don't have free will, the question still comes on how do I live from that point on? And or say, I think I'm the only one with free will and everybody else is just a mindless sheep, wandering around. Then how do I live from then on? How do I treat other people?
Ooh.
Or if I'm a politician and I'm like, oh, nobody has free will, or everyone has free will, then how do I legislate that? Can we punish people for crimes if we think they don't have free will? Or do we have to pretend that everyone has free will, regardless of whether they don't, in order to have a functioning society?
I feel like society goes under the idea that we do have free will, right?
Well, not to get like political, but that's one of the core ideas of, I guess, like social aid, right? The idea that there are some people who don't
Oh,
necessarily have the means to create their own success, so the government needs to provide some help, versus the idea that everybody makes their own success, everybody can become successful through the sheer power of their own will.
sheer tenacity.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. Damn, like life is complicated, huh?
yeah.
It's so crazy. You ever what I was talking with a friend recently and he used the word dissociate as like one time like he traveled like from here in San Jose down to San Diego, and then from San Diego he drove to LA to go to Disneyland, and then he was in Disneyland for a long time, and then it was after he was at Disneyland and like doing all that traveling where he said he sort of just felt like he was dissociating, and the more he thought about it the more he felt like, oh, like I'm here, like what, huh? uh and I feel like sometimes when I think about how sort of like complicated, like it happens to me when I think about how complicated the world is. Like I'm here looking at a screen where I can see the voice waves, and it's like what are like there's so many there's like an infinite number of rabbit holes in which explanations can be given for the insane amount of things that we are constantly going through in a daily life, that it just sort of like on some level I feel like it overwhelms me, and then I'm just like I'm like alive. Do you ever get any of that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I would say the feeling of disassociation is different from that, right? Well, okay, let me explain further. But like the idea of mindfulness, right, is when you're fully in the moment and you're observing everything, and then you're thinking, I'm here in this moment observing this thing. And I feel like disassociation would be more the concept that you're in a place feeling all the sensations of being there, but not feeling like the I in it, you know? That this is happening around me and I'm supposed to be here, but I don't feel like I'm here, you know?
I can see that. I can feel like I'm here, but did you say not supposed to be here?
That was their own choice words,
Okay, yeah.
but
I was like, I would like that would
oh
feel
no, I
weird.
think I said I'm supposed to be here, but I don't feel like I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. I was just getting sort of thinking about what you were saying and I didn't hear you there. Um
It's hella foggy now.
Hella foggy. It was very foggy this morning. But enough about the weather. um what were we saying? Yeah, like feeling like being here. I mean, I guess I would, yeah, like the lack of I.
Yeah,
I think I got into that past, you can say like the 10-minute mark last time, where it feels like I jumped back and forth in that episode of feeling like I feel like I'm here. I think I mostly feel like dissociated when I'm like alone. Like there could be people around, but if I'm not directly interacting with somebody else, that's like keeping me sort of like centered or like grounded in reality, that I feel like I can slip and just like go off and be like, "Huh?" Which is
yeah.
which gets me because is it did I bring up like consciousness particles in
Particles.
yeah, like to think like what if I was talking with like I think it was like my boss, and uh it was just during a slow day and we were talking. I was like, yeah, and then there's like, like are we real? Like of course like we're made of atoms, but like the thing inside our head that we think is there, is that real? And he's like, well, here's the crazy thing, right? Is like as far as we haven't discovered, there's no like consciousness particle or like a thing. There's no physical. You can't dissect the brain to a point to find it. And so if it's not like a real, like if it's not a physical thing, or at least like on some sort of wavelength, like if it doesn't have its own sort of like, we have the electromagnetic fields and the gravity field or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Like there's no like consciousness field, or at least we haven't discovered it yet. And so going off the premise that if we haven't discovered it yet, it probably doesn't exist or whatever. then like it's not a real thing. And if it's not a real thing, then it's not real.
You remember in 11th grade, we were talking about the differences between abiotic and biotic things.
Yes.
And I was talking to our teacher, and we talked about how if you break everything down, every living thing out there, it comes down to a bunch of abiotic things, a bunch of atoms with zero life to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then those somehow all come over together to form a bunch of living things. But if you break everything down, it's not living.
Like humans are made of organs and tissue, and organs and tissue are made of cells. All those things are alive, but then cells are made out of like molecules, and molecules aren't alive. So it's like, what? Huh?
Where
Like,
does it come from?
I remember the direct question you asked was how are, or I think maybe our teacher like summarized what you said in the sentence. How are biotic things made of abiotic materials? Or how do abiotic materials make up biotic things? And he was he just sort of smiled and went, "That's it, right? Like, huh? Like crazy, huh?" He's like, he's like, "Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, no, don't get it." And that's crazy. So that I feel like that kind of comes down to like, like where, and here's another thing. Like if we think about consciousness in a sort of like, if we are sort of like real and we are here, like if we, like when we're born, like, nothing is created or destroyed or, like that, whatever law that is. Something, we can't create a thing when we're born. So we're either like already made, like let's say consciousness particles or the consciousness field is a thing. That we have to be like some sort of a culmination of a thing that makes it like somehow real when we're born, and then when we die it like sort of disperses or like evens out if it's like a wave of some sort. But like it can't be created when we're born and then destroyed when we die, right? Do you see?
Why not?
Why? Oh my God. I felt like saying that while I was saying that too. I was like, what if it is like the one thing that contradicts?
I mean, we know our brains are just a mass of electrical signals like traveling around. So, and once those electrical signals stop or they can't be powered anymore, then that's it.
Yeah. For a long time.
As far as we know.
Oh, fuck. I remember for a long time my conclusion was that consciousness is a pattern. But yeah. But then I got to thinking about what happens, like if I take a synaptic screenshot of me and then I put it somewhere else, it's the same pattern, but it's not like all of a sudden I'm going to start, whatever part of my consciousness is, I'm not going to start like seeing double, right? Like one where I'm over there and one where I'm over here.
No, because it's connected to your eyes.
Because it's connected to my eyes. What if I connect someone else's eyes to my brain? Am I them? If I can...
Are your eyes essential for your sense of being?
I feel like they are. But what if what if we do more than eyes? What if I... So all the senses...
So this goes back to the body swapping thing. If I ran like all the electrical signals through this other person's brain in the same way, and they were processed the same way, is that you?
You mean like if you did like a sort of live stream of what I'm thinking into your brain?
Yes. Sure. But even then...
What even then?
You'd have to store... I don't know. I feel like we would both agree that memories are a significant part of the self, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, even if you were to give somebody all the exact same information, they would react differently based on their memories or even like automatic reaction. A lot of our automatic reactions are the same, but everybody has different ones depending on
how are you
their past,
Dude, based on your memories. Right?
I mean, you could say that, yeah.
Because, like, not emotional memories, but, like, very subconsciously you quickly discern something based on experience, and experience is memory.
Sure.
Anyways, keep going. Or was that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Because I don't even know if you'd be able to be aware of two of yourself at the same time, you know?
You mean, like, even if I did somehow, like, if I sort of, like, not literally, but, like, kind of hollowed out someone's brain nervous system, like, so they have the sense of touch, and then they have the sense of sight, and then taste, all their senses. And if I just sort of, instead of it going to their brain, I just hooked it up to my brain, are you saying, like, I'm not sure if the brain could handle that kind of input either. Like, I think we'd probably just, like, we wouldn't be able to control two bodies. Like, we wouldn't have the capacity for it because our brains haven't evolved to do that. But what if we could? I guess if we could, then we would have just, like, two bodies.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ways to manipulate situations.
To manipulate a situation.
Like, you've heard the teleporter problem, right?
The teleporter? You mean the Star Trek thing?
I think we're talking about the same thing. Mine wasn't about Star Trek because that's copyrighted.
I don't think Star Trek is going to hammer down on this podcast here.
Well, no, I just didn't hear it in terms of Star Trek. And they probably would if it's way more famous.
Yeah, but it's something like the swamp thing, right?
I don't know the swamp thing.
Oh, well, just say it. The thing you're talking about.
The teleporting thing?
Yeah.
If you were to say how it teleported to Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works is you go into a machine and it just deletes you, basically. It deletes everything about you. And then it reforms an exact replica of you on Mars with all your memories, your entire body.
Yeah.
Did you just get murdered?
Yeah, are you like, is it the same thing? Yeah, so I do kind of talk about this later in the last
Yeah, I figured you'd somewhat have addressed it before.
Yeah. So it turns out that this question is actually a lot older than teleporters and Mars. Like, it's actually up there. What's that one ship thing? I always want to say Archimedes, but that's not
that's different.
It is different, but what is the name of that ship thing?
Theseus's ship.
What?
Theseus.
The ship one. So that, you know how old that one is? There's one almost just as old as that called the Swamp Thing. And the thing behind that is, like, you're by, like, a super nasty swamp and you get struck by lightning and it destroys you entirely. But at the same time that strike of lightning hits you, another lightning strike hits the swamp and creates an exact version of you. So, like, that one is before we had science fiction. But as it turns out, though, Star Trek, exactly what you explained, your Mars teleport thing, that's how teleportation works in Star Trek. They destroy you on an atomic level and then recreate you piece by piece. And, like, Dr. Bones is a character, and he always calls it glorified suicide, and he never wants to use it because he's like, bro, I don't know if I just die. And I don't know why he's a doctor. I guess because, like, he knows what it is.
Like there's two different aspects you could pick on about that, right?
Okay.
Like, is that the same person?
Yes.
And if you destroy all the atoms and reconstruct them or whatever, you could debate about whether that's a real person, right? But if you still feel like the same person afterwards, does it even matter?
I feel like it would matter to the me that got destroyed. Like, I wouldn't... Like... Because, like, what if, like...
Things can't matter when you don't exist.
Things can't... I know. It's hard to care about dying, though, if you think about it like that. Like, how come I, look both ways when I cross the street if, like, I don't care if I'm dead when I die? I guess because, like, I care about other people. But then, like, eventually they die. So, like, why does it...
So,
Yeah. Do you justify... Do you have a thing? I don't think I've talked with anyone that does have, like, an answer.
we don't know.
We don't... Yeah. No.
You know,
No.
I was thinking beforehand about how we should do a podcast where we just take apart Hamlet to be or not to be speech,
Oh, my God.
fully break it down.
Do you... Okay, we can get on that in a second, but I want to wrap up the...
But,
Huh? Do I go?
well, I was just gonna say, I guess there's so many different. This is probably gonna jump into the next topic.
Okay. Okay,
We're
so
doing that now.
I'll hold on. I'll wrap up the last one. I was watching...
But, sorry.
Okay. Just real quick. I'm just going to wrap it up real quick. Okay. I was watching a movie called Sorry to Bother You, and basically the main character, he's in bed with his girlfriend, and he sort of, like, says that. He says, like, like, why? Like, I'm going to die, and you're going to die, and our kids' kids are going to die, and their kids are going to die, and their kids are going to die, and eventually the sun's going to blow up, and nothing's going to matter anymore. So, like, what is... And he's just, like, sad, and his girlfriend is just sort of, like, taking in the sunlight, and he's like... And she's like, it's because when I kiss you right now, and she, like, kisses him on the cheek, she's like, it's not for posterity's sake. It's about right now. So, like, this moment, that's what matters. And I'm like, you know what? That's beautiful, and that's probably as good as an answer as anyone's going to get. So, that's what I believe that now.
I don't know.
You don't... Do you not like it, or it's just, like, whatever?
I think it's kind of comforting to think that, like, in a while, you just won't exist. Like, the concept that would scare me most, I think I mentioned this in a conversation, like, a long time ago,
Uh-huh.
would be, like, the idea of an afterlife, like, specifically reincarnation.
You're afraid of reincarnation?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Why not? Oh, does life seem like a hassle? You just want to sleep? I felt like
This might not be the best podcast, though.
I mean, hey. But no, I've felt like that before. Where, like, I'll be, like, in a totally fine mood, and I'll just be sort of, like, scootering home, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm, like, tired. I could just sleep forever. And then I'm like, what did you just say? And I'm like, yeah, I feel like I could. And it's like, but wouldn't you, like, miss stuff? And it's like, eh. And then I'm like, that's pretty close to just being, like, okay with dying. And I'm like,
I mean, I don't think it's the worst thing to be okay with dying.
it's not. I feel like it's a lot worse to not be okay with death, because then you're just, like, living in a plastic bubble until you die. And then, like, that's not even being alive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, okay, so that wrapped up. You wanted to say something earlier.
Oh, I was gonna.
To be
Or not to be?
To be or not
That
to
is the
be?
question.
That is the question. So let's stop with that first line there. There's like 52 lines.
I don't even remember.
I don't.
But
We both know it by heart, so that's
we
fine.
can do a whole analysis on this later, honestly.
Later, should it be like its own episode?
Yeah, but we can just address it for a bit. Like that line.
Yeah.
That's the core of.
It's a very good thesis statement.
I wouldn't even say it's just the core of the play. It's just
Ooh, the whole
the
play.
core question that we all have to ask ourselves.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
And if you continue onward, there's this sense of, like, not just like, is it better to be alive than dead, but is it better to be passive or active in our lives?
Yeah, so I was listening to this Radiolab podcast, and it goes over a story of these two sort of, like, there's like a producer and their friend, and they go on, like, this cross-country bike tour. And it's just them two, just like this person and their friend. And this person is sort of like, I believe everyone at their very core is a good person, and all of our sort of like tics and aggressions are that good person just trying to, get out. Like it's just, just like a side effect of like this, a good person deep down. But their friend sort of thinks that like they have a very more active sort of position of like, if there's someone like, so if there's examples in the story and like they come across like this person who won't fix their bike, or like their friend's bike breaks down and they go to this small town and they're like, hey, can you fix their bike? And the dude's like, I can have it fixed tomorrow. Tomorrow comes around and the bike's not even touched. And the first person who's like, there's good in everyone, is like, oh, they just, something must have happened. Like, it's fine. Like, we'll be back later. And their friend was pissed off. And it's like, no, like we said they could do it now. He's not busy. Like, what's the deal? Like, she wanted to get up in his face. But then the person that's like, oh, they're person one is like, just calm down. But then eventually person two, like after a very long time of this person not even touching the bike, just gets up all up in their face about like you should do the thing that we're here for. This is your job, blah, blah, blah. So they have a very active stance, which is like to be more like to try to push people to be better than themselves. And then the host kind of asked the question like, so to think that like everyone is sort of good, is that just sort of like a optimistic defeatism of like, oh, don't like bother people, they're just they're just a good person, they're just trying to get out? Or is it to be like upfront and to get in someone's sort of face to try to help them get somewhere? Because there's an example later where they meet across this person that clearly had like mental issues, and they told the story about like how they almost killed somebody, and then like the person too like gets up all up in their face and it's like, you got over here and you told us this because you wanted us to help you, and like, God damn it, like if you wanted us to judge you, I'm judging you. You need help, and that's fine. And like, and they go all about it. And so while the person one would just sort of like didn't want to like trigger them, want to do anything, but person two just like got up all up in their grill. And I can kind of relate this back to Hamlet, the full play, not just To Be or Not to Be, which maybe does tie back to Be or Not to Be because of the comparison with Fortinbras, right? Mm-hmm. Like Fortinbras has a very, like Fortinbras and Hamlet are exactly the same character, except Fortinbras just tries to conquer Denmark, and Hamlet is just, he wears black clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're right about it being like the whole play. But which one do you think is better?
To Be or Not to Be?
Or not even that, but like if I had to put you, like with the example I gave about like the biking people, which sort of person do you think is better for the world? Somebody who's like unconfrontational and just sort of like tries to let people be as good as they are, or somebody who will be confrontational but ultimately wants to help someone be better than what they are right now?
I don't feel like those are the only two options.
I mean, I feel like you would have to be one or the other in a circumstance, but you don't always have to pick one or the other.
Okay, I would say most of the time, if you want to fix everything, you just can't. So, and the majority of things, I guess, there's so many different topics here, but the majority of things in your life aren't worth getting worked up about. The ones that are, you need to really push for.
Yes. 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 Very much yes. I agree wholeheartedly, which is I feel like that's something like a little pet peeve of mine when people complain about something almost like zero world problem, like beyond first world problem, and like they're complaining about it, and I'm just like, could you like maybe not though?
I mean, if you hear people complain, then you can just treat it the same way. It's not worth getting worked up about.
Oh my God, I'm being a hypocrite. Yeah, that makes sense. But then, I don't know. I feel like
There's a time to be like, hey, chill out, fix it, or shut up. And there are times where that's not okay.
Yeah, like there are like if somebody's complaining about like I don't know, like a physical object that did not have much importance, then it's like, hey, do you think you can zip it? But like if it's something like, more personal, I feel like everything that can go under the umbrella of like personal people should be able to let it out, because holding it in is definitely not good. But sometimes you just hear somebody. I feel like I have a different perspective as somebody who works like in personal service or in a service position where like I check out laptops and stuff, and people come in and they're like, yeah, like I have like this problem with a thing, and I'm like, oh, you could fix it by doing that, and they're like, nah, but like I want to do this, and it just doesn't work, and they'll just like stand there because there's not a line, so like they feel like they can just stand there and just keep talking to me, and I'm not gonna tell them to like shove off, but I just have to like sit there and listen to it, and the amount of times that happens just makes me so like it's worn me down to the point where it's like like if it was a brake pad, the brake pad is worn dangerously thin at this point, and I'm just like, huh? What did you say? But like,
yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
It's different when it's your job.
Yeah. I feel like it was good to winter break was good for me. Or not winter break, but it was over winter break. Just not being at and work it's not terrible, but it's you always got to have a break.
Yeah.
So that's to be or not to be.
Future podcast.
Huh?
We'll make that a future podcast.
Future podcast. That's so that's like a tidbit. It's a trailer. Teaser trailer right there. Yeah, oh, you go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if you wanted to wrap up or go into the other topic.
We can go into other topics for sure. We got time.
How long are your podcasts? They're super long, are they?
They're like 2 hours.
All right.
But I mean, hey, if you feel like splitting, don't mind just letting me know.
No, it's okay.
Cool. I mean, I guess I don't know why I make them so long. Maybe because I planned to edit them, but then I like forgot, and then I just figured that there's a topic. Do you ever do something, like for example, I was going to bed one night, and every night I went to bed before then, I would turn up my blinds sort of like the opposite way, like where they sort of face up at an angle, and so they, like if it was a slope, the slope faces towards the window, which I don't think is what you're supposed to do. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why do I do that? And I was like, oh, because the dust, I want the dust, if it falls off of the blinds, to go towards the window and not like onto my desk. And then right before I got into bed, I was like, it wasn't for dust, it was for cold, because like cold air goes down, and so I want to try to keep like cold air going towards the window. And I was like, was that really why I thought? And it's like, yeah, that is why I thought. And I was like, I just completely justified an action that I did that was entirely wrong. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, this is irrelevant, but I did the same thing.
Uh-huh.
Because my roommate's mirror was right in front of the window. And, like, I could see the light reflecting off it, and I was terrified that if I came back one day, the dorm would be on fire because her mirror redirected the sunlight.
Uh-huh.
But it was also for my benefit because I want the top part, and I need the sun to wake me up.
Right. So you've seen that video of people, the CGP grade U is 2 thing?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is what my midterm is on Tuesday.
Oh, shit. So I've only like pretty much watched that video, and that's pretty much all I know. Is there anything that I'm missing that's like also pretty cool?
I don't remember the CGP Grey video very well. It
Damn.
was just, I think some of it was different. Like, when we discussed in class, we mainly talked about splitting the brain as a way to eliminate seizures
Yeah.
rather than a cure for schizophrenia. But, I mean, it could have served multiple functions.
Yeah.
I know there's a big controversy about whether the brain actually has like a logical side and an emotional side, you know?
Oh, really?
It's not a problem. It's like the whole you only use 10% of your brain thing. A lot of scientists get angry when you say it. But it's
Oh.
true that the left side of the brain, for most people, is associated with the language portion, and the right side
Is
has more focus on motor control. But like each side of your body is controlled by the opposite side of your brain.
yeah.
The majority of right-handed and left-handed people.
Yeah, I was listening to something and it was talking about why most people are right-handed, and it has to do with motor control being on the left side of the brain because that's where language is. Although, didn't you just say language is on the right side of the brain?
Language is the left side of the brain.
Language is the left. Yeah, so like we have to have
for
a lot
most
of
people.
for most
Some
people.
it's different.
So some people can have it on the right, or like both, or what?
Okay, if I remember the statistics correctly, 96% of right-handed people have like speech in the left side.
Whoa.
And then the other 97, because 3% have it on the right side. But for left-handed, I think it's like 70% have their speech in the left side, and 15% have it on the right side, and the 15% just have it on both.
Both. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know the brain could be so variant.
Yeah.
Brain's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
What do you think of the AI, good or bad?
AI?
Yeah, like whose position would you take, Zuckerberg or Elon Musk?
I don't know. I feel like
It's okay
it
to
depends what AI.
like general AI.
Just like,
Because we have AI right now, but they can only do like specific tasks. But if we were to make like a general intelligence AI,
general intelligence.
yeah,
I mean, I guess going back to the consciousness thing,
whoa,
I feel like consciousness kind of keeps us in check, like morality-wise.
the idea of consciousness.
Not the idea of consciousness, just the fact that like we feel like there is an us that exists in a world with other us's. That kind of keeps us in check. But like, if you create something that appears, even then, if something appears conscious, then there's no insight into them, so we have no choice but to assume it's conscious.
Right.
But it wouldn't have.
Yeah, like
It wouldn't really keep itself in check, you know.
I want to ask you about that. What do you mean that, like, the idea that we have a consciousness and so do others? How does that keep us in check? Like that we're responsible for our actions, or something else?
I feel like human consciousness in particular surrounds the idea of what am I doing here, you know? What do I do? And how do I deal with it? And I don't know if it might not be a logical view, it's just like a biological one that ensures our survival. But this consciousness is like, if something else is conscious, then I don't hurt it.
Oh, so like, sort of like empathy.
Yeah, I guess in that sense, but like a lot of the way that like we do bad things, I guess, is when we don't recognize that another person or party or group of people has the same consciousness that we do.
Mm.
But I think like there's sort of this inherent idea in the brain that like if it's like me, then I protect it.
If it's like me, then I protect it. And yeah, so if an AI had something like that, it would feel.
It would theoretically feel. I don't know.
That's interesting. I could see that. It's sort of
Even
like.
if it was like
Uh,
like you know how we think about animals when we're like, oh, they're conscious, but not like my level of conscious. So it's okay if I kill it and feed it.
oh, what was that?
Or it's a skateboard.
Nice. Keep going.
The idea that like I'm more conscious than this group of people, and they're dumb, so they're clearly not fit to rule or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like you've put some nice. Because I've always heard of that, like they're gonna think of us like ants or like bugs, and I've always thought of that like, why or not like why, but like I guess so. But you put a very nice sort of like foundation for that sort of like thought, because you compared it to like us and how we're like, we treat people the same because we think and we know that they think the way we think, but like an AI would sort of inherently think differently than us. And so it wouldn't have anything to be like empathetic with.
I don't know. I feel like I guess my question to you would be like, do you think that people are created for a specific purpose?
Ooh. When you say purpose, do you mean
like they were created to do something? And I guess it's just supposed to tie into our other topic, but
so
it's just a question.
Right. I like it. When does it in this regard, does your question mean when you say purpose, is it the same way like someone has a purpose for a thing that they've done, or is it sort of like life's purpose is to just make more of life? Like that is just life's goal.
I guess either one. But like, do you think people
have a purpose?
Yeah.
I think pretty solidly in my mind, I think no. Like it kind of like we are kind of I feel like we are just sort of here. Right. And we can give ourselves a purpose, and they all should at least fall under the umbrella of like nice. Like just like the biggest general umbrella of nice, like be like not bad. So like if I were to think like of our purpose unto ourselves, like something we define for ourselves, it's different than a purpose of like something that isn't us. And like the isn't us, I feel like life just sort of was just, just like natural selection is sort of like a pattern of consciousness where it's just like, yo, we're just doing what works. And then eventually humans were like, oh, cooking is pretty cool. And then we just skyrocketed into here where we are right now. But I feel like, yeah.
Oh, I would say we could get into it later, but there's a lot of like philosophy surrounding that idea. And yeah.
I mean, we can get into it now, or.
But I was just gonna say, like, if you make an AI, I guess why do we make AI in the first place? Is it because do we want to be convinced that we're special and that we're the only creature who could achieve some sort of consciousness? Is it just because if we created AI, we would create a consciousness without any specific purpose other than to exist, just to be.
Yeah.
Whether you believe that's like a human's purpose, it wouldn't even have all the human motivations, I guess, because there wouldn't really be incentive for it to like, or maybe there would, I don't know, maybe incentive to
like
reproduce and create more of itself.
Yeah.
But we just kind of, I feel like well, my personal thought would be that we kind of just want to create another consciousness to experience it from someone who wasn't. Ooh. I don't know where I'm going.
I think I
don't know if
kind of
it's
get
fair
it.
to just force something to be conscious.
You said, what was that?
Just
Whose? Hello?
This is getting off topic, but like,
Okay, feel free to absolutely get off topic. And I heard you hesitate a little bit when you're like, me personally think blah, blah, blah. Like, that's almost what this entire show is about. Like, feel like, go ham.
just you know what? This can try answer later. It's fine. But one of the core questions that we all ask ourselves is, why me? Why am I here?
Yeah.
And theoretically, that's like a central part of consciousness, having that sense of me, then it's kind of contrary to the idea that some people have where I was put on this earth to do this. This is my purpose.
Yeah.
Rather than, so I feel like it would be an attack, not an attack, because it would confront a lot of people's personal philosophies if like we created this consciousness without any purpose at all. We just created it because we were lonely, or we just thought it was cool, or we wanted to see if we were special.
Because it was there.
And
so
now it's here.
Not to put like words in your mouth or paraphrase you too harshly, but like it would feel like we're playing God to religious people.
No, I don't think so. Because like the concept of God is that like he individually selects each person and he forms them with, you know, this specific purpose in mind or whatever. And we wouldn't be doing that. We would just be like, hey, here's the thing. And they would probably be like, no, this person isn't a person because they weren't like blessed by God's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think rather than being like shaken by it, they would just be like, oh, this isn't a person because this isn't my idea of a person, you know?
What was that last part? I couldn't hear you.
They would decide. They would think that it wasn't a person because it doesn't fit their
Conception.
mental image of what a person looks like.
Yeah, like I always
Or
think.
consciousness, rather. I don't want to use person.
Right. I sometimes. I think it's also why it's fascinating, the idea of like talking with animals, because if we could figure out a way to do that with like, what are the smartest ones, like dolphins and like some gorillas sometimes, of like if we could just like have a conversation with them, we could almost get that perspective of like, hey, you're a thing that can think about itself and how it is a thing. What do you think? Like, we kind of got our whole thing going, and so we think this kind of, but like, what about you? Do you have any like things we haven't thought of yet? Which I think would be like, if we were to make an AI that sort of like did just like kind of like not have a specific purpose, but it was just to be like, hey, you're a thing now. What
How does it feel?
Yeah, how does it feel? And if they're just like, feels bad, man, you'd be like, ah, shit. Update, guys. Consciousness is sad.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like there are a bunch of big questions you realize everybody has to ask themselves at some point. And part of it is like to be or not to be now. But like, is being here worth it?
To be or not to be?
Well, you can decide that being here isn't worth it and still decide
to be. Interesting.
Yeah. Or you can decide it's worth it and still decide not to be, you know?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that question is almost you have to take on a perspective of something that can both be here and not be here, right? Because when you're making a choice, you are in a sort of position where you have not made either choice. So if you have to choose, you have to put yourself in a perspective of...
I mean, but do you really choose to be? Or just one day you kind of just show up and you're like, damn, guess I'm here. What do I do from now on?
Damn, guess I'm here. Hey man, sometimes I think it's you got to think about it, or sometimes it just comes to you where you think about it like, "Hey, I am here. Nice." Uh most of the time it's kind of like, "Damn, I'm here." But those little bits and pieces of like, "Hey, I'm here," are good. But to get back to what you're saying that you don't have to have a perspective of before you make a choice.
I think it's just the case for every choice you make, right? Because when you think about it, there's like, you can think of all the different ways that led up to you making that choice, how you could have made better choices before, and what you could or couldn't have done to lead to a better choice instead. But in that moment, all you have make like all you can do is make the choice that you have.
Yeah. I think what I'm getting at is sort of like a personal conundrum, if not a personal like question I have for your question, which is so like, the whole the one of the questions, like the question you posed me, like is being here worth it? You can only ask that question to somebody if they know what not being here is to determine if it's worth it.
But everybody's.
What?
That's what some people say. Like, why be afraid of dying? You didn't exist for thousands, millions of years before you suddenly did. So why be afraid, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, on the other hand, these are all things I've wanted to write short stories about.
Dude.
But, like, the people who attempt suicide and really come back feeling like life is worth it again.
Yeah, like those cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think our imaginations are strong enough that we can conceptualize the idea of not being.
I'm not sure if I've talked with you about it, but I remember I went through that. It turned out to be like a phase, like a long time ago, like sophomore year of high school, where I was thinking about like death. Like my whole life I was raised in the perspective of like afterlife, like you never stop being alive. Like you go to sleep sometimes, but like, or conscious, but like you always come back and you'll never forever go away. You always were and you always will be. But I was like, but what if like, nah though? And the sort of thing I sort of I imagined was this idea of being dead, but I couldn't fully let go of the consciousness that we are, like we are thinking. And then all of a sudden I had like this sort of like very vivid imagining of like still being conscious, like a spark of consciousness, but having absolutely no body to do anything in. And then just like, then I was like, well, then I would see like the entire humanity pass by and then like heat death of the universe. And then I would just be there and it would be nothing forever. And it was like super terrible and horrifying. And I like almost like I had a straight up panic attack and it was crazy. But that's not necessarily true because of when you're dead, you don't know that you're dead. And I like
theoretically.
Why do you say that? That's so terrifying. Like, what if death was just locked in syndrome forever?
Some people think that.
Who thinks that? Do you think that?
No.
Okay. Do you know?
No, that would be terrible. That's why I was saying the idea that we just stop existing is better than the idea that we continue existing but in a different form.
I mean, I guess, but here's the
rub.
Here's the rub. So, let's say there is no consciousness particle, or maybe consciousness, is just sort of like a pattern that happens in the human brain, and only the human brain can do it because we have evolved in such a way that that consciousness can that our brain can sort of send those signals in that pattern, and that pattern is what consciousness is. Our brain matter is made up of things that we've eaten before, and the things that we've eaten were once alive, and other things, and they were also not alive things. For some, like atoms and stuff, this is the first time they've been a part of something that is biotic, right? But, probably like a decent amount of what we're made out of were previous living things, like dinosaurs or fucking plankton or something, right? Go down the food chain. So when I say reincarnation right now, I'm not really meaning like consciousness reincarnation where you're like a consciousness thing and then you die and then you wake up again, but sort of like when you're born, you're not the same person when you die, of course, but neither is your body and neither is your mind. And it's not just like it's beginning, middle, and end, but it's like almost like derivative, like integral, like it's this, like it is different an infinite amount of times, almost all the way in between life and death. So we kind of like are reincarnated. Like, who's to say the neurons in my brain right now that are sending the electricity signals that make up consciousness couldn't eventually end up in something else's brain?
I mean, that goes back to the whole mind-body thing, right?
Does it?
I don't know if I even want to use the word mind, because when it comes down to it, the only reason we have to believe that there's a sort of consciousness that we feel it, right?
Is that we feel it?
Is that we feel like we are a person, that we do things, the kind of awareness,
Uh-huh.
And if I said, okay, I just like, babies aren't people.
Babies aren't people. Okay.
Babies don't understand what's going on.
I
have no awareness.
I really appreciate that you said that first, but yes, I totally agree.
So like, the baby wasn't me,
The baby wasn't me?
I wasn't.
You were never a baby.
But that baby wasn't me.
Yeah. Do you feel like you in the 3rd grade is you now?
Yes.
Yes, you do?
Because I could identify me, I could be like, I am experiencing this in the 3rd grade. And that like sense of I,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned, that's me.
That's interesting. I feel sort of the opposite. I feel like me, very young, in the things I thought, like my goals, sort of then, are so different. Like, if we are our choices, or if we are what we think, or we are like our actions and all that stuff, if you put me back then, like way back then, and me now in a scenario, I feel like I would do such a level of different things that I feel like I'm not the same person.
Well, that goes back to the idea that you are what you do, right?
Kind of, but I also kind of want to tie it back to like you are what you are made out of. Like I am physically made out of different things too. Like I'm just so different on so many levels. Like this I that you talked about of like of you being in 3rd grade of like I can think, and then you being now being like I can think. In the first like 13 minutes where I was like of the last episode where I was like, what do you mean I think? Like let's focus on I. Like I don't necessarily think that like that the whole I part like exists. And so like okay, go ahead.
I don't know. I think you can take that with any idea, right? Because you talked about it, I think, in your podcast. Not last week, whenever you did your podcast, but when you think of a human, right? If you cut off an arm, it's still a human.
Mm-hmm.
If you cut off 2 arms, it's just a human without arms.
Yeah.
If you cut off a leg is a very unfortunate human, but it's still a person. And a long time ago, there was a philosopher that was like, "Oh, humans are featherless bipeds, right?"
Then
Yeah,
that,
I'm sure you've heard this.
yeah, then that,
Another philosopher was just plucked a chicken and ran. It was like, "Behold, a man." So,
yeah,
a lot of what we think things are isn't defined by a set of qualities. It's just, I know it when I see it. Like the whole pile of sand thing, right? If I ask you how many grains are in a pile of sand, you're going to be like, I don't know, but I know what a pile of sand looks like when I see it. So, a lot
I think
of
the answer to that question though is 3.
3.
No, 4. Because you need 3 for like a base, and if you could put a 4th one on top to make like a second layer, like a small pyramid, I'd say that's a pile.
Well, I guess another thing is like, what is a chair, right?
Okay.
What is a chair?
It's a chair is a thing you sit on.
A thing you sit on.
Oh, but a
if I were to
boulder
ask
isn't
you
a
to draw
chair.
what would you draw?
I would draw a thing with 4 legs.
Right. But if I showed you a thing with 3 legs, you would still be like, yes, that's a chair, I can sit on it. Or one with like a weird curvy bottom, where there's like weird abstract modeling to it. So it'd be like, that's a chair, I can sit on it, I recognize that, therefore it's a chair.
Okay.
So a lot of what we think of as concepts and objects are just in our minds, and they're part of just what it is recognizing it as that.
So this recognizing thing, when you think about you back then, is it sort of like this combo streak of always be like recognizing something, and that particular sort of like streak of you recognizing things is how you stay the same person?
Yes.
But what about when you go to sleep?
What about when I go to sleep? I don't exist.
So when you go to sleep, when you went to sleep last night and you woke up this morning, how are you the same person if you're like combo streak of recognizing
Because I feel
things?
like I am. When I don't feel, if I'm not feeling, then I don't exist.
But what
if
if
I can't recognize that I'm feeling, then I don't exist. If I don't recognize within myself that sense of I, then there is no I.
Yeah, when you go to sleep that happens.
Yeah, so I don't exist while I sleep.
But when you wake up,
Then I feel like there's an I, and I am here.
but I feel like I'm I, how come I'm not you?
Because you feel like you're you.
Oh fuck.
And I don't feel like you.
But everything else that defines me and you, if I body swap those things, right? Then like I can remove everything
well, if
of
we were to
you.
body swap, then you would look at your hands and be like, these aren't my hands. You have this idea that this thing is yours rather than someone else's. And if you were to live in my body for a while, you would probably think, oh, this is me now. This is my body.
Yeah. And then so why am I not you then?
Why? Because you don't feel like me.
But let's say I get used to you.
Then you become, well, you don't know. You would still feel like you.
I would still have my memories and stuff.
You would still think there would be the same sense of you, because the you exists whether it's named Alex or whatever. It could be named Brienne or whatever, but you would still feel like it's you.
So you're kind of thinking that there's like a solid sort of you and I, and or just you. Like for me it's I, right? That there's this solid sense of I. So what's the difference between like the teleporter thing and going to sleep?
I mean, my personal belief with the teleporter is that if I feel like it's me after I come out, then it's me.
Because you have like that I thing.
Yeah.
But what about the whole? So would you agree with the idea that like there is no physical consciousness particle thing. Like there's like it's not a physical or in any way measurable thing.
I mean, it could be, but even if there was some physical explanation, I would still feel like me, you know? Like, if you could trace it to the exact part of my brain, and I don't know, modify it or cut it out, then as long as I felt like me.
You think that you're like the same person?
Yes.
Interesting. I don't know. I don't think I feel like I understand kind of what you're saying. Like I think I do. But I don't think I feel the same way. Like I feel like if I cuz what if I make like an exact copy of you and now they think that they're you? Are you now two people?
No, I'm me.
But what about them?
They can be another person named Rianne who does the exact same thing as I do, but I'm not aware of them in my mind, so I'm not them.
Huh. Fascinating. This is new. I like it. So you're like a person, and then that's nuts. Yeah, I think you would really like the Fifth Science book by Exerbia, because one of the very first stories, I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the first stories is like this person is just doing their thing, but then all of a sudden, like the story's written in first person. The first person sort of like wakes up and they just suddenly realize that they're just watching themselves do something. And then all of a sudden they can like leave this person and they go into like this place where there's like other consciousness things that like are conscious but like are not embodied. And it's not like a ghost or a spirit, but like turns out what it is like consciousness is sort of like an ocean and individuals are like streams of consciousness. And then what they are, what this person was, or like what this consciousness was like a split off of that stream that can now go free throughout all of consciousness. And so that idea sort of has this idea of like there are specifically things that are conscious and are not conscious. But when I asked you, like if I made an exact copy of you, and because you aren't aware of it, it's not like that consciousness stream now splits into two. It's just that like you would keep going on your own separate sort of stream here. Completely regardless of whether or not I made an exact copy of you that was also conscious and thought they were them or you. That's fascinating though. That's something new for me because I've always thought it had to be one or the other between like I can split my brain into like if I made an exact copy of me that also thought it was me, I wouldn't feel like there is two of me. But then how is it different than if like I go to sleep or if I get died and completely recreated? But that's interesting. It's good stuff. Do you have any last thoughts you wanted to?
No, but I definitely would like to do this again.
Yes, this was great. This was fun. I feel like I'm just gonna suddenly remember something that I wanted to get to as soon as we stop. But hey, that's what's gonna happen. So you ready?
Sure was.
To end?
Yeah.
All right,
Do you have a special ending thing?
Nope. Well, thank you guys for listening. I had so much fun. Thank you, Rianne, for coming on the show. I can't wait to do our well, what does Hamlet know? Part 1.
And then What is philosophy about anyway?
What is and then what is philosophy about anyway? Those are two very great spin-offs that are for sure is going to happen. And I'm not being sarcastic. I really look forward to doing those if we do truly get around to doing that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. See you next time.